morning and welcome to the August 2nd edition of In the Garden Facebook Live. I'm Maureen Thomas and I'm serving as your moderator today. I'm a Montgomery County Master Gardener intern for 2022. If you're interested in learning more about the Master Gardener intern program, please visit the website. Applications are due in the fall for the next intern class, 2023. The gardening experts joining us for today's version of In the Garden are Annie Odette, a Montgomery County Master Gardener since 2016, who's volunteered for numerous plant clinics around the county. Her motto is learn as well as you teach. Her love and passion is the Close Encounters program with agriculture. She works with the private and public school fourth graders and really enjoys that. Staff events in the community and is a gardener at home to 40 plants on a balcony that gets about 6 hours of light. So if you're trying to get any questions answered about container gardening, you know who to reach, Annie Odette. So thank you for joining us, Annie.
Thank you.
Michaela Barnes is our second expert today, and she is also a Montgomery County Master Gardener and has been one since 2018. She's co-lead of the USO Demo Garden and a current member of the Montgomery County Master Gardener Board. She loves working down county, is a Navy brat, and finds her leadership at the Demo Garden as a way to give back to the community. It's a down county project, by the way, so those of you who are down county looking for a volunteer opportunity, feel free to reach out to Michaela and learn a little bit more about the process that you need to go through to qualify to become a volunteer at the garden. Before we start today's program, I'd like to mention that the Montgomery County Master Gardener program is actually a very diverse program that offers a variety of outreach programs to the community. They have a speakers group, they have the demonstration gardens, youth gardening programs, plant clinics, such as the one that we're hosting today on Facebook Live, therapeutic horticulture programs, and very active Grow It, Eat It program, amongst other special annual events. We host this monthly Ask a Master Gardener session twice a month on Facebook and in person. If you're interested in learning about the dates of future programs or the in-person programs, again, please visit the Montgomery County Master Gardener website. Before we begin going into any further discussions, I'd like to encourage you to consider sending us questions. You can do that by entering it in the comment section of the Facebook Live presentation. Otherwise, consider sending your questions to our email address, inthegardenwithmcmg@gmail.com. That's all run together, inthegardenwithmcmg@gmail.com. Or you may call 301-590-2842 and leave a voice message, which includes your email address, and someone will return your call. So we will begin today's program with a short discussion of what it's like to work at the USO Demo Garden. Michaela, you could take it from here and tell us a little bit about your work at the Demo Garden.
Thank you very much, Maureen. A little background is the presentation up? Okay. A little background. The USO, if you're old enough like me, it's Bob Hope doing events, but it's really all around the world, and it's there for active duty service personnel and their families. And in 2014, the USO was inaugurated a large facility at Walter Reed here in Bethesda. And they had a very large grant from a famous reporter who was embedded and had a horrible IED accident and spent time at in fact, at Walter Reed, getting help with their brain injury. And the wife said the only thing that really got her through was being in nature and being in her garden. So they endowed one here and at Fort Belvoir. So that's sort of the background. It's a healing garden for the USO at Walter Reed. But though it was a lovely garden, there wasn't any process or money to take care of it. So if you have a garden with a lot of deer around and a lot of weeds and a lot of grasses, you end up with yuck. It was just awful. And we got a call from them as master gardeners and asked what we could do. So we went in several years ago and started to reclaim the garden for the community there at Walter Reed. And our mission is to educate. So not only did we go through the garden and try to reclaim it, but we worked with the community. This was pre-COVID. We haven't started it again, but pre-COVID, there would be a lot of companies that would come and do volunteer work there. So we would lead very large groups, sometimes like 40 people in the garden, telling them how to help out with this garden and reclaim it. And you'll see in one of the pictures that one of the people was from Clark Construction. They even brought a huge earth-moving backhoe, and we got to use that gardening, which turned out to be really helpful, actually, in this case. So we've gotten the garden to mostly there, not completely, but we're mostly there. And what we also do is we work with the hospital and a certified recreational therapist, and we do gardening projects with the service personnel going through PTSD therapy. And it's really very fascinating. Some of them have no interest at all. And some of them, it's just so exciting to see how they react. One person, this wasn't when I was there, it was told to me, one person said, I've been trying really hard to learn how to trust people again. And this made me feel like I could do that. And it's just really wonderful. And giving back, it's so funny. You'll be out in the garden and a service personnel in uniform will come by and make a very big point of saying, thank you for your service, which is kind of hysterical to me, but okay. So anyway, these are the kinds of things we do in the garden. We help other volunteers learn about gardening. We have educational aspects to it. We have a lovely little library where we have literature and we have signage all throughout the garden. So it's really useful to be able to take tours through of people going through the USO and show them what they can do in their own garden. So anyway, that's what we do with the USO, short version.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Thank you for sharing the history of the garden. And when do you anticipate? You mentioned you're not over there yet. Are you hoping to get back there?
Oh no, we are there. We've been there all through, luckily, all through COVID. But some of the programs that interact with other people haven't been reinstated by the USO. It's not us, it's the USO. So we work at their direction and at their facility. So
fantastic. Okay. So the first question today, I think we'll move over to the question section now. And then at the end of the program, we'll talk a little bit about some upcoming programs and make sure we share that exciting information with our listeners. And again, I'm going to remind anyone who's watching the program right now to please consider submitting a question during this broadcast and to put it into the chat. And at the end of our question Q&A section of this program, we will check on those questions and attempt to answer them. And if we're not able to, then they will be included in the next program and answered at that. So the first question that we received was a question about tomatoes. The lower leaves of my tomato plants are turning yellow and have holes in them. Is this early blight? Can I get rid of it? Annie, would you like to answer this question?
Well, for one thing, as any kind of plant grows, the lower leaves do turn yellow and should fall off. And it looks like from the picture that the leaves are just naturally turning yellow. They don't get as much direct sunlight and they do fall off. And it also could be that there's some sort of stress on the tomato plant. It's either too hot, too wet, too dry. But there are plenty of leaves on the rest of the plant. So I would just snap them off and put them away, because if you look at any kind of plant that you've got, the lower leaves always fall off. So I don't think there's really anything terribly wrong with this tomato plant.
Annie, when you take the leaves off, should you throw them into a compost bin, put them in trash? Is there any concerns about where you...
Well, if it's got holes and she's worried about it, I'd put it in the trash. You only want to put things that you're not worried about in the compost. You never want to put any diseased or anything like that in the compost, because it'll contaminate the whole compost. So I would put it in the trash.
Okay, great. Thanks, Annie.
You're welcome.
The next question we received was about a Precipia plant. The question is, what is causing the gall on my Precipia? How do you get rid of it? Michaela, would you be interested in answering this question?
Sure. I love Forsythia. It's one of the early signs of spring. It makes me smile every time I see it. The gall is caused by bacteria. Think of it as like a plant tumor, and it gets in there from some injury. It could be something as simple as a leaf falling off a branch. But the good news is it's really not an issue. What you should do is you should cut it out. And if you have to really kind of cut a lot out to get the gall out, that's perfectly fine. Forsythia are very hardy. Their galls are very common. Just cut it out. Again, following up on what Annie said, I would not put it in compost. I would put it in the garbage because it is a bacteria. And I would also make sure that you sanitize whatever you use to cut it afterwards so you don't spread it to something else.
Your tools, your gloves, all of those.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, on to peppers. A detailed question. I have several pepper plants. They have been very slow to grow. Most look like the pepper in the first plant. We have some photos. However, one is severely stunted, as in the second photo. What is wrong with this pepper plant? Annie, would you like to take this question?
Yeah, it looks like there's a combination of things, that either there was not enough light, enough water, or that the temperature fluctuated too much for the pepper plant to grow. And at this point, because we're halfway through the growing season, I would just, that super small one, I would get rid of it. It's not going to do anything. It may not get enough. They may not have gotten enough light. They may not have gotten consistent watering. Or you might have put it out, and I just thought of this, it might have gotten blighted by frost. It might have gone out too soon. But we're halfway through the growing season, and I don't think it's, well, I have a motto: if it doesn't grow for me, I don't coddle the plant. A lot of people do coddle their plants, but I just think that I would take that one out and see if the other one will grow. But you have to be consistent in watering, and it has to have a consistent 6 to 8 hours of light to grow and flower.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, the next question is about cherry trees. We have 3 photos. And the question is, my Japanese cherry has many dead branches and several of the large branches have orange growths on them. What can I do to help the tree and get rid of the orange growth? Annie, I know you just answered one. Would you like to take this one?
Okay. We've had various things. Cherries, the Japanese cherries, it's an ornamental tree, and I've had estimates that lives 15 to 20, 25 to 30. I don't know how old this tree is, but from the size of the bark, I'd say it's closer to 15 or 20 years. Now, so it may have gone to its full life, and that's kind of sad for people. However, what you've got is let me get this. You've got a fungi. And what those orangey yellow bracts are feeding on the heartwood and the phloem and flock of the tree. So that's probably leading to the dead branches because it's going into the heartwood. If that trunk, if it's all over the trunk, I'm not sure that there's a way you can save it. and I know that might be very sad because it might be sentimental. You may have planted it for a particular reason, but an ornamental cherry has a finite life. It's not like an oak tree that can live a couple hundred years, 15 to 25 years. I think this tree shows so much damage because the bracts are there because they're feeding on the heartwood, which is how it feeds the rest of the tree. And the lichen is, that's typical, any north-facing tree. But at this point, I just think that no more effort is worth keeping that tree. Sorry.
So the poor cherry has done its service and now it's
and it may just be too old, and putting a lot of effort into it to me doesn't make sense. I'd take it down and go find another cherry. If you like cherries, go get another one. I read that there's one species, the Higgin cherry, Prunus subhiratella, can live longer than 20 years. So you might want to see if you can find that and then put that there. But make sure you clean up all the dead leaves and all the dead branches before you plant anything else.
And throw that in the trash, not compost.
Yes, again, trash, big dark plastic bag trash.
Okay. We're bouncing over now to peony. And Michaela, may I pose this question for you? What is causing the black spot on my peony, and how can I prevent it?
Okay. Looking at the pictures, the most likely candidate is Botrytis, which is the most common problem with peonies. It's, like I said, it's very common. It's a fungus. And at this point, this late in the season, what I would do is just cut it back. And if it's so pervasive that you have to cut the whole thing back, that's fine. It's towards the end of the season. The peonies have done its job. It's long past flowered. It should be fine. Again, put all of those things you cut back in the garbage, not in the compost, and sanitize all of the instruments used to cut it back. I would say that a couple of things. Peonies like sun. So if they don't get enough of it, that could be an issue. So you might want to, explore that and transplant it if you think that's an issue. They also, fungus does really well in sort of closed areas without air circulation. So depending on what's around it, you might be able to, for future, right now, I just cut it back, but for future, cut what's around it back to get more air circulation. And I would just watch next year to see if you get it early in the season before the flowers come, and in which case you can use some fungicides for it. But I have this problem every year, and I have beautiful peonies, and I just cut it back.
Great. Thank you. Okay, the next question, and I thought maybe we'd have a little bit of a group discussion about this because there's many different ways you can answer this question. Question number 6 is about temporary ground cover. We don't have a photo for this, I understand, but if you look at our website, there is a ground cover list that folks can find for suggestions. The question that was submitted is, after pulling up a number of areas, I have exposed soil in sun to part shade. What can I plant now to fill in until I plant again next spring? So I think this is a very interesting question because I live on a property where I've got numerous gardens, and some are, have sun a good portion of the day, but I really have mostly shade gardens. And I view the fall as my prime planting time rather than the spring. So I'd kind of like to turn this around and say, why are you waiting till the spring? I would argue that you go ahead and start thinking about what you want to do now and plan it out. And then in the fall, when, so many of the perennials are on sale, start filling in portions of that garden, and then consider putting mulch down, or maybe going ahead and putting the fabric down so that you kind of preempt the growth of the weeds and prepare the ground for the spring. I do have some suggestions on ground cover, but honestly, I think that the nice thing about ground cover is that, again, you could be going ahead and starting it in the fall, and then it will do a lovely job in the spring of really taking, it's had a chance to really, our planting season goes well into December here. So it would have the winter and, depending on the winter, the early spring, a chance to really get seeded.
And if you want to shelter it, you could just put dry leaves on it over the winter, because
Exactly.
the leaves break down and provide nutrients, but you're also covering up the new plants. So that would be another thing to do.
And I might add that I would highly consider native plants for it. If you walk around neighborhoods, you see a lot of invasive ground cover, and I would stay away from that if you can, for environmental and beauty reasons. There's beautiful native ground cover. And to follow up on your point, Maureen, I would take the opportunity in the fall not to do temporary ground cover, but to do ground cover that will live past it and come back year after year. And I really love gardens that have both ground cover and perennials and annuals, and they can all live together in the garden. And the good news is, if you get a good ground cover, they keep out the weeds and you have way less gardening to do.
And you also have used less mulch, because the ground cover serves as a mulch. It's covering the bare ground.
Exactly. So let's talk about some of our favorites. One of mine that I really like, and I'm pretty sure that it's a native, is woodruff.
Woodruff.
Sorry, it went out of my head for a second. I have some Pachysandra, but that's not native. But I think sweet woodruff, isn't that native?
I'm not sure.
I don't think so.
Michaela,
I don't think it is. But I have some and love it.
Yeah, I did ajuga. The problem with ajuga is it will, in over 3 or 4 years, just take over. And it's really pretty in the spring when you've got a spike 6 to 8 inches high of a purplish flower, but then the rest of the time it's just leaves. So it depends on what you want.
Yeah, I recently planted phlox, and a lot of people don't realize that there's phlox for sun and phlox for shade.
Yes, ground cover phlox.
And it can be a lovely ground cover and has beautiful flowers. And so that's one of my projects for my garden. And I've gotten varieties that are native for shade.
Yeah. For sun, what about creeping thyme?
Say that again, please.
What about in sunny spots, creeping thyme?
Oh.
Anybody worked with that?
I have, and I put it between. It's not a native, but it's not invasive, so I've done it. And I put it between the slate stepping stones in the garden.
Yes, it's lovely and releases a fragrance when it's.
Yeah, as you walk over it, you smell it.
Another one, as you mentioned, was the creeping phlox, and knowing the difference between garden and shade and sun. Yeah. Ice plant is another one. It's a fun one. It's very bright colors. And what about creeping sedum?
That would work too.
Yeah.
Portulaca would be another one. Portulaca can seed itself also. It's an annual, but in our environment, it's an annual. In a more hotter climate, it's a perennial, but that's a nice one because it has beautiful flowers.
And then what about lamb's ear?
Lamb's ear sort of is like the ajuga. If you want the space to be completely covered, it will cover and nothing else will grow there. So it's a decision. If you want to cover the space and have it covered, ajuga or lamb's ear will work. It doesn't allow for, once it gets going, for interplanting as well.
Yes. So that's where maybe in the spring you might find yourself doing a little bit of waiting in order to get some of your perennials to show. But I think we've done a good job of hopefully converting the person from just trying to put some temporary things in to recognizing that it's a beautiful palette and it's time to get busy in the fall with some planting. Okay, our next question is about blueberries. Annie, I'd love to toss this one to you. It was submitted by Carol Pollock Nelson, PhD from Rockville. And her question about her blueberries is, on our blueberry bushes, we have a couple photos that are 3 years old. We've never had a blueberry. We have no blueberries, no flowers. We have 2 bushes planted around 4 feet from each other in a bed that gets full sun for most of the day. Also in the bed are blackberries and bee balm. The blackberries are thriving. The entire bed is surrounded by deer fencing. Can you help us figure out why we don't have blueberries?
Yeah, for one thing, it sounds nice to put it on 4-foot center, but if you see wild blueberries, and I went to a Girl Scout camp on the Nato River, and we had bunches of wild, they're crowded together. You probably should have a couple different varieties and maybe put them on 2-foot centers because they're not cross-pollinating. That may be one reason you don't have flowers. And it also looks like there's a heavy mulch in the picture, and maybe there's not enough rain penetrating. So a ground cover under the blueberries would be a good thing. Again, that's imitating what you see wild blueberries, and commercial blueberries are planted close together because you need to have like pollinate. Also, the soil should be acidic, so you need to adjust the pH, and maybe it's not acidic enough. So what I would do is go and find a couple other varieties of blueberries and add 3 or 4 more bushes, because 4-foot center, it's a kind of lonely blueberry. And it, as I said, when you see them in the wild, they're bunched together. You don't get as many blueberries on each bush, but you get overall more blueberries. And I think it's the kind of the cross-pollination, too isolated. And again, the soil might not be acidic. Where I saw them growing up was close to a river. So it was sort of sandy soil, which was very acidic. So that's what I would do there. Because there's no reason it's not pollinating. It sort of reminds me of the winterberry. You have to have one male and the rest females, and you crowd them together. Otherwise, you don't get berries. And I think that's the same thing with the blueberries.
So, Annie, it sounds like maybe a very initial first step might be to do a soil test.
Yes, a soil test.
It's a win-win. Whatever your next step is going to be, it's a win-win.
Yeah, then you can see what you need to do to supplement your soil. And the next one, if you know the variety that you have, that you planted, find it, go looking out. And I like Minnesota's botanical garden. They're really professional, and they will tell you it's what other varieties you might need. Or you could go to the University of Maryland Extension. So you want to get 2 or 3 other varieties so that you have some cross-pollination. So first soil and then other varieties. And again,
thank you, Annie.
Okay.
Okay, so then the next question we have is, I love the title, Good Flavored Tomatoes. And Michaela, I thought I'd toss this one to you. The question is, which type of tomato plants produce tasty fruit? There's so many that just taste like, this person said, there's so many that just taste like plastic right now. So can you discuss the results of tomato testing? I know that the master gardeners do it occasionally at events, and it's a huge hit.
So I'll give you 2 answers. One is more scientific and more objective, and one is subjective and more personal.
Excellent.
So the more scientific and objective is every year up at the Durwood Demo Garden, which is up at the Agriculture Reserve. If you haven't been up there, if you're up in that neighborhood, you can just walk on and tour it. It's great to see. Every year they do a taste test. It's a blind taste test. They have numbers, so nobody knows what the tomatoes are, and they do a taste test. We pulled numbers from one recent one. There was 181 votes of 53 different varieties. So that's a pretty good scientific sample. I used to teach statistics, so that's not too bad. I'm liking it. But anyway, so the top three out of that tasting is a variety called Blush, which is a cherry tomato, a variety called Sun Gold, which is a cherry tomato, and a variety called Mountain Merit, which is a slicer, a bigger tomato. So those are three that I would look out for. I've certainly seen them in the garden stores, so they should be findable. The other thing I would just say about the fruit and vegetables in the demo garden at Durwood, just a little plug in here for some of the things that Master Gardeners do. Every year we grow these as a demonstration, and everything except for those few tomatoes I just talked about gets donated to MANA and to people who are food insecure. And over the years, Master Gardeners have donated many tons of fresh vegetables and fruit to the Montgomery community. So just a little plug there. Now for the more subjective, personal answer. I love Sun Golds. They're cherries. They're wonderful. I love Sweet 100s. They're also cherries. They're wonderful. I literally have neighbors knocking at my door asking if I have extras and that I ruined them for any other tomatoes. So I really plug Sweet 100s and Sun Golds. And I would say, since they're both cherries, they're reasonably good to grow in containers if that's sort of an issue for you. If you don't have space, they do need sun. The bigger the container, the better. And make sure you water it, because container gardens dry out faster than gardens in the ground. But they are doable in gardens that don't have a lot of space, and they're wonderful.
I'm growing a cherry tomato in a container, and it's now about 7 feet high. It's got a cage around it. It didn't set at first, I think the lower, but it's really nice to have. And I never managed to get any cherry tomatoes into the kitchen because I eat them when they're ripe.
So Annie, since you are our expert on container gardening, have you found a favorite tomato plant that you'd like to put in your pot out there on the deck?
I can't remember the name. It comes from a fellow master gardener, Alex Friedman. She gives it to me. It's got a black cast to it, and it gets to be a pretty decent size. Well, I don't let them get too big, but it's got a both sweet and tart taste at the same time. And I'll think of that. But containers really do work, and I get plenty of sun, but you do have to water it. When you've got a plant in a container, it will dry out so fast. I'm looking out on my deck, they're fine, but I had to water it this morning. So sometimes it's twice a day, but that's a good way to do it.
The 90s.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're on to the next one. And actually, Annie, I was going to put you on the spot for this one. It's about a squash vine borer. And we do have a photo. And the question is, how can you prevent squash vine borers from laying eggs in the plant? Are there any varieties of squash that are resistant to squash vine borer?
Well, what you have to do is, when you look for a plant, usually you get that garden, look one that has a variety that says it's resistant. Nothing is deer resistant. Deer will still eat it fine. But you look for one that's more resistant. And the other thing that I learned was that squash vine borers have 2 life cycles in the summer. The first is more intense than the second. And if you can just pull the bugs off as you see them, which is kind of, just throw them in a thing of water or whatever you want to do, it won't kill the plant. So it might not look the squash is pretty, but if you cut it out. So it's not a killer of the plant, but you do have to keep on it. And the second life cycle, they're much smaller and not as active, so you're going to get more squash. It's a kind of interesting bug, but it's pretty, but no, you don't want it on your squash. So looking for something that's resistant, making sure that you examine your plants daily to see what's there. Those are the things that I would do.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Annie. Appreciate that. Now we're going to go on to another question about tomatoes that's obviously on everybody's mind this time of year. Is it safe to eat tomatoes damaged by stink bugs? Michaela, could you take that one?
Sure. It's perfectly safe. It's fine. I would cut out the damaged part and use the rest of the tomato, but it's fine to eat and enjoy the tomato.
There's actually an add-on question to this. Is it okay to eat fruits that have been damaged by insects? For example, well, the tomato stink bug is an example, but any fruit that's been damaged by an insect.
Any insect, any fruits, a fairly high number of combinations. And I don't know how to answer that, to be honest.
Haven't you found an apple with a worm in it? You just cut it out.
Yeah.
I mean, my inclination is to say it's fine to eat, but that's a pretty open-ended question. So I'm not sure.
It is. But they asked it, so we're throwing it out there. Okay, so on to cucumbers. And this question, I'm gonna open this one to either of you or both of you. Looks like we do have a photo to go with it. And the question is, my cucumber plant has produced 2 fruits to date. One was perfectly normal, but the one shown in the photo was curled up. What caused this? How can I prevent it from happening again? Would one of you like to take it?
I'll start there with that. It looks like it's a case of pollination. It didn't get pollinated. Perhaps you've been so diligent about keeping your insects out of the garden that you've forgotten that they're beneficial insects that you have to pollinate. A cucumber is not self-pollinating. It needs cross-pollination. So you need to think about that. And they require honeybees for pollination. So if there are lack of bees in your area, that may be it. That leads to the misshapen cucumbers every time. So you have pollination has occurred, but it may not have occurred enough. So you have low insect activity. When you're growing a garden, you want insects in the gardens. A lot of insects are beneficial. People sort of go, insects, but not all insects are bad. So you have to think about that. And temperature. So sometimes when it gets really, really too hot, and we have had some really super hot days, I just saw I have one thermometer lying flat on my balcony, and it was 100 degrees. So we've had some really hot days. So that it can kill the pollen in addition to keeping the pollinators away. So you're going to likely have deformed cucumbers. Also, insufficient water. It's like if it's in a container or if it's in a really hot spot, you need to be watering probably daily and sometimes twice a day. And fertilizer, you need a fertilizer. Maybe but maybe if you have too much fertilizer, that also could cause the misshapen cucumber. I don't have any idea what it would taste like. I just have no idea. But so you have to think about that too. Well, so it also could mean that there's not enough nutrients in the soil. So you need to look at, again, a soil test might tell you that. So you've got a combination here: pollinators, soil test, and water. So they all have to be balanced.
Lots of options. I know it's also good practice to plant marigolds and things like that amongst the cucumbers, because then you increase keep some of the bad bugs out, you increase opportunities for good bugs, good insects.
Well, also marigolds are good to plant around tomatoes. And there was a question on our own listserv about squirrels. And when I moved here, it was in the wintertime, and I had a squirrel that just thought, pots, I can dig in my pots. So as soon as the planting came around, I have marigolds lining the edge of the balcony. I don't have problems with squirrels. And so that helps with squirrels and insects. You're bringing the beneficial insects.
Excellent. Wonderful. So we've come to the end of our question and answer period. And again, I would like to remind our viewers that you're welcome to submit questions to our two experts that we have here today, excuse me, by putting your question in the chat. And at this point, I would like to also remind you that you can email your questions for this program or future programs to inthegardenwithmcmg@gmail.com or call 301-590-2842 and leave a voicemail, including your email address describing the issue or question. We always ask for as much detail as possible. Photos are always welcome and very important as they're used to research the specific issue affecting your plant. I'd like to remind you that the next session of In the Garden is scheduled for Tuesday, August 12th, I believe. Tuesday, August 16th. Tuesday, August 16th. So please mark your calendars and join us. And any questions that you'd like to submit for that program must be submitted prior to the deadline of July 26th. You know what? I'm sorry, that's not correct. It's August 12th. Sorry, deadline for submitting questions is August 12th. And at this point, I'd like to ask if Bev, do you have any questions that we'd like to have answered today?
No questions today.
Okay. Then at this point, I'd like to go on and mention a couple of the upcoming activities that we have coming up that we'd like to encourage folks to attend. And before I do that, I also want to thank our two guests today and the behind the scenes team, which includes Mary Barnhart, and our researchers, Mohar, Sheila, Deborah, Christine, Howard, Heather, for all their hard work and preparation for today's program. So as I mentioned, our next program is Tuesday, August 16th at noon. We also have the Montgomery County Fair, and there is a special website for the fair. The Master Gardeners always volunteer and have a demonstration garden at the fair. They will be there from August 12th through the 20th. Our Annie, Michaela, you want to do a shout out about the fair? Any favorite memories or things about what the Master Gardeners do there that you want to help promote?
Oh, it's really amazing what they've done over the years. It's really growing its soil on top of asphalt, and they grow all kinds of things. One of the things they do during the fair, they have some sort of scavenger hunt for the children. And that is really good for the parents and the children because they're both learning. And it takes them around the garden to see different things, see different kind of flowers, different kinds of plants. And then, I can't think of her name. We always have a lady made out of flower pots at the front of the garden. So that's
great.
Yeah, and I know who does it. And so there are all kinds of things. And it's set near a couple of the buildings that have craft exhibits. So it's in a very good location. And there's some big, really trees. And it's a fun thing. And it's really fun to watch people. And sometimes you'll see, I'm seeing this several times, people will come by, walk through once, go off, come back and walk through again slowly. So that's
great.
Yeah, so those are my memories.
Michael, do you have anything you want to shout out about the fair?
Well, I think that some of my favorite things, being a little bit selfish about it, is getting to meet and work with other master gardeners. There are a lot of us, which is good for the community, but when you volunteer, it's always a chance to get to meet and work with new people.
Yeah, that's really fun. You sit when you're not answering questions, you're learning about somebody else and their garden interests. Can I put a plug in for plant clinics? That's why I like plant clinics too. It's the same thing.
Absolutely. So for those of you who watch this broadcast, please come by the booth and let us know that you are watching our program on Facebook Live and any suggestions for future topics. We are always interested in what you might want a more in-depth discussion of, and that's how we recruit our experts for the various programs. I'd like to also ask you to save the date for our community garden Grow It, Eat It event. The Montgomery County Master Gardeners are supporting Holy Cross Hospital in Germantown with a community gardening event, and that is taking place on Saturday, September 17th. Remember, if you have any questions, please contact us on the link on the screen and submit your question. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you, Annie. Thank you, Michaela. And thank you to all our viewers. See you again soon.